The Irish didn't believe in heaven or hell. They believed something else was happening right next to you, all the time, separated by nothing more than a shift in perception. The other world wasn't up in the clouds or down in some pit of punishment. It existed parallel to this reality, occupying the same space but shifted just slightly out of phase. You could walk there. Actually walk. If you knew where the borders were thin, certain hills, specific lakes, the interior of ancient burial mounds, you could step through. And here's the part that breaks the entire Christian framework we're used to. Morality had nothing to do with it. The other world wasn't a reward for the virtuous or a punishment for sinners. Access wasn't about being good or bad. It was about knowledge, about power, about being in the right place when the veil thinned. The dead lived there, yes. But so did gods. So did spirits. So did things that had never been human and never would be. It wasn't a resting place for souls. It was a place of power, a realm where the rules bent differently. And time there? Completely unmoored. You could feast for what felt like a single night and return to find your grandchildren had grown old. Or you could live 300 years of joy and step back through to the same afternoon you left, like no time had passed at all. The other world didn't care about your timeline. The side weren't cute fairies. They weren't Tinkerbell with an attitude problem. The Aos Sai, the people of the mounds, were the Tuatha De Danann, the old gods who'd retreated into the other world after losing Ireland to the Milesians. Former deities who didn't vanish, just stepped sideways into the hills. They were beautiful, yes, but in the way a blade is beautiful, sharp, cold, made to cut. Dangerous. Capricious. Deeply, deeply offended by disrespect. When humans encountered them, they didn't come back with whimsical stories about wishes granted. They came back changed. Marked. Hollow-eyed. If they came back at all. Some were pulled across permanently, living decades in a night, aging to dust the moment they touched mortal ground again. The Irish left offerings at the mounds not because it was charming folklore. They did it because angering the side meant your crops withered, your children vanished, your livestock dropped dead in the fields. This wasn't superstition. This was survival. And they never called them by their real name. The fair folk. The good people. These weren't terms of affection. They were protection spells disguised as politeness. Because naming them directly, speaking of them too plainly, was an invitation. And you did not want to be invited. Tir Ene Nog. The land of youth. It sounds like paradise, doesn't it? A place where you never age, never sicken, never die. But here's the thing they don't tell you in the fairy tale versions. You also never change. And that's not immortality. That's amber. That's being preserved. Oisin learned this the hard way. He rode off with Niamh of the golden hair to her father's kingdom across the sea, and he lived there for what felt like 3 years. 3 beautiful, perfect, unchanging years. Except when he finally came back to Ireland, 300 years had passed. The moment his foot touched Irish soil, not even his full weight, just 1 foot slipping from the stirrup, all that time collapsed on him at once. He crumbled to dust in seconds. Because nothing in Tir Ene Nog had actually moved forward. He'd been held in suspension, like an insect in resin, beautiful and untouched and fundamentally dead. The Irish weren't idiots. They saw the trap. Immortality without transformation isn't life. It's a beautiful painting of life. The other world offered you eternity, but the cost was becoming something static, unchanging, almost unreal. You could live forever, sure, but you'd stop being you. You'd become scenery in someone else's endless dream. You didn't stumble into the other world by accident. You went to where the walls were already cracked. Side mounds, ring forts, ancient burial sites. These weren't just monuments the Celts left behind, they were gateways. Places where the membrane between worlds stretched so thin you could push your hand through if you weren't careful. The dead were already there, just on the other side of the hill. And sometimes, if the light hit wrong, you'd see them. Certain times cracked the boundary open wider. Samhain especially. The night when the year died and hadn't been reborn yet, when the dead and the living walked the same roads and you couldn't always tell which was which. The Celts didn't celebrate Halloween. They endured Samhain. But it wasn't just dates. Fog did it. Mist did it. Twilight, that grey space between day and night when nothing's quite solid. The moment between wake and sleep. Liminality itself was a doorway. Anything in between could split open. And here's the thing, the Irish never forgot. They didn't build on fairy mounds. Didn't disturb the ring forts. Because they knew those places belonged to something else. Even now, modern construction projects in Ireland sometimes reroute around a single hawthorn tree rather than cut it down. Bulldoze a fairy fort and workers get hurt. Equipment fails. The project dies. They're still there. The thresholds. And they're still watched. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The other world needed us too. The side would take humans sometimes, pull them across during twilight or at liminal times, and it wasn't out of cruelty. They needed what we had. Music that came from mortal lungs. Stories that still tasted of dirt and grief and time. The vibrancy of a life that ends. Because immortality, it turns out, drains the colour out of things. They'd take human midwives to help with side births, because whatever grew in that deathless place still needed mortal hands to guide it into being. They'd steal blacksmiths, pull them through overnight, because you can't forge what's real in a land where nothing decays. Metal needs fire. Fire needs mortality. And the changelings, those eerie, wrong children left in place of human babies, they weren't sadism. They were exchanges. Substitutions. The other world needed mortal energy the way we need oxygen. They were suffocating in their own perfection. The relationship was almost ecological when you think about it. Two worlds feeding off each other. Needing each other. Dangerous to each other. The Celts understood this. They didn't romanticize it. They knew the other world wasn't evil, but it also wasn't safe. It was hungry. And hunger doesn't care about your intentions. Here's what changes when you understand this. The other world was never somewhere else. It wasn't heaven, wasn't an afterlife you had to die to reach. It was here, always here, just slightly out of phase with the world you're used to seeing. The Irish weren't primitive for believing this. They weren't superstitious. They were describing a relationship with reality that we've mostly forgotten how to have, a way of moving through the world that took strangeness seriously instead of explaining it away. You already know this feeling, even if you've never had words for it. Liminal spaces still feel different because they are different. Your body registers it before your brain catches up. The airport at 3 a.m., the forest path at dusk, the parking garage stairwell. That prickle at the back of your neck isn't malfunction. It's recognition. The otherworld as a concept is permission. Permission to trust your own experiences of the uncanny, to stop dismissing them as tricks of exhaustion or brain glitches. You've felt it. The afternoon that stretched too long and strange. The road that didn't lead where it should have. The dream you woke from but weren't sure you left. The Celts had a framework for that. They knew that reality has seams, and some moments split open wider than others. The otherworld isn't waiting for you after death. It's pressed against this moment, right now, and the Celts knew that some thresholds don't require dying to cross. Follow Blackfire Atelier. I'll see you in the shadows.